is actually a new interface for Mara. They just updated it a couple of months ago. And you can access, there's a link up there to access the legacy editor. So for people that were attached to the old way of doing things, do that. One thing that I liked in the old editor that is not here in the new, and I've asked them to put it back, and they promised they would, is something they call magical auto pause, which is just too cool to get rid of. And that actually listens as you're typing, and it senses when you need a pause. And then it senses when you've caught up and starts playing again. So you never have to do this tab thing to pause and so forth. You just listen and type. And it becomes sort of like a video game then, because you're trying to keep up, and you're listening and typing, and it'll pause if you start getting behind, and it does a pretty good job of sort of, determining that you need some help, and so it's going to pause for you, and it's going to play for you, and I just find that to be a blast to capture video in that kind of environment. Yep.
What is appropriate in terms of editing? I mean, if you have somebody who has a lot of and they repeat a few words over and over before they get to what they're trying to say, edit? Or is that inappropriate to the accessibility?
Yeah, she was asking the same thing, and you want to, your job as a captionist is to capture what's being said. And so if that's what the person is being said, then really it should be there. But there are sort of two different schools of thought even among the deaf community, that some don't want too much of that, and I think there's a point at which it becomes distracting. One could argue that it's distracting for everybody. It's distracting for people who are listening to it too, so it shouldn't be any different for people who are reading it. But kind of my rule of thumb is you want to preserve at least a little bit of that, because it's reflective of the person, how they communicate, and maybe to some extent their personality. If they say like a lot, that kind of thing. But if there's so much of it that it really becomes difficult to read and difficult to sort of extract the ideas, then I wouldn't like capture every single one of those utterances, but just within reason, try to just echo what you hear. So any other thoughts or questions about that part of the process?
Are we going to talk about how to save?
Yeah, so I thought this is a short video that I just did here, and it was already halfway done. So I thought I'd just walk through the next steps on this video. So the first thing is, it actually lists the steps up in the upper right. Step 1, type what you hear. That's got a check by it now. That's done. Step 2, sync the timing. And there's a little start now beside that first caption with an arrow key. So that's telling you that when you want to start that caption, you hit the down arrow. And so we'll hit tab to start playing the video, and as soon as it's time to say from jet travel to software, we hit the down arrow, and that caption will appear at that point.
To software.
Oops. We go back to the beginning. I think there's a keyword trick after that.
From jet travel to software to medicine, this place has given the world some big ideas. A lot of that has to do with this place. Over the past 150 years, the University of Washington has fostered one of the most creative cultures in history. And today, it's where a new generation of leaders, thinkers, and doers are changing the world again. If you have talent, curiosity, and desire, discover what's next.
And then up arrow to make that last caption go away, or at any point where you've just typed a caption, then there's silence for a while, then up arrow will stop the caption, and then you've got a period of time with no caption before the next one enters. So it's basically, the second step is just watch the video, and then you sync by hitting the down arrow when you want the next caption to display. So that process takes only as long as the video is long. So you've watched the video now a couple times through. one time typing, one time hitting the arrow. And next step, start reviewing.
From jet travel to software to medicine, this place has given the world some big ideas. A lot of that has to do with this place. Over the past 100...
And I'm not sure what exactly is going on there, but it seems to be a little out of whack. But we'll just call it good. You wouldn't, of course, do this. Let's see if it's messed up now.
From jet travel to software to medicine, this place has given the world some big ideas. A lot of that has to do with this place. Over the past 150 years...
Yeah, it looks like something slipped a little bit there, so that second or third caption got its timing off a little bit. But so normally we would correct that. But back here in the caption editor, there is a download option. So once we have completed our caption, we've gotten the time sinks in place and everything looks good, we've reviewed it, we like what's going on there, seems to work. Then we can download, and it lists all these different formats that we can download in, including the ones that we have mentioned. SRT, DFXP is actually the same thing as TTML. The W3C is acronym crazy, and so that's just something to know. But VTT is probably, since that's the kind of a way of the future, then VTT is a good choice, and YouTube will support that. So we download VTT, and let me open this. I'll show it in Finder because I'm not sure. So show folder. Where's my folder? Here it is. Let me open this with a text editor. It'll give me a choice. Notepad should work. So this is what the WebTT format looks like. Let's make the font a little bigger. So you've just got the text that you typed. You've got, for each of those captions, you've got a start time, and then space / greater than for that arrow effect, and then an end time. And this is what you have. SRT actually looks very similar to that. All of the caption file formats, in fact, they're all just plain text. They all essentially have the same thing with just slight variations in their syntax. And we could edit this. Since it's plain text, we have it open in a text editor, we could tweak this. We could even do all the captioning by hand if we wanted. Watching a video and pausing and looking at the time on the screen and just typing it in like this. It's pretty laborious doing that, but that it could be done. But for editing, actually, I've done this quite a few times where you discover later on that you got a typo in your captions, and you don't want to have to go all the way back into Amara just to correct the typo and go through this whole process again. So you can just open up your VTT file, correct the typo, save it, and then you would need to re-upload the VTT file to YouTube or wherever you have your captions stored. So we have this. Now we need to feed it to our media player, assuming that we are the owner of the video. And so I'm logged in over here into the UW Huskies channel, and I think I am. Is that true? YouTube keeps changing their interface, and I'm always confused. If I click on My Channel, ultimately what we're after is Video Manager. So as a video owner, somewhere we should have a Video Manager feature. And that lists all of the videos that we have. And the video I'm looking for is Discover the UW. There it is. Or is that a different Discover the UW? Looks like this is the one.
From jet travel to
Open
soft.
that in Video Manager. Now where to go? See it?
The lower search video options in the upper right-hand corner, yeah,
Oh,
right there.
yeah, there we go. Okay. So then we can edit many things about this video, privacy settings and so forth, including subtitles and CC. And here we select English. And it's got the automatic captions that Google has generated. They're already up there. We could take a look at those and just see how those compare. Not bad. In fact, that looks pretty good. A lot better than a lot of videos. And we could click edit, and we could actually use this as a caption editor. We can go through and change the times, or we can change the text. So YouTube, provides an interface for that. If instead, since we've already gone through this process of creating another caption track that's better than this one, then we can upload a file. We can either upload a transcript and Google then will do the syncing, or we can upload a subtitle file, and then we browse to our VTT file and upload that. And since my VTT file is actually a little messed up, I'm not actually going to do that, but this is as simple as the process is. And once you upload an actual caption file, then it's a good idea to get rid of that automated English caption file, so that users don't have two English caption files to choose from, because that just is confusing.
So would you remind me again, in the transcript, if you pull in the transcript file, does that need to have some sort of formatting that indicates where breaks are at all?
It just needs text. There actually is some markup that Google supports. So if you upload a transcript and you find that it didn't do a good job because there's a break and it shouldn't be showing anything, but it's confused by that break, and so it's trying to sort of force text into that break where it doesn't really belong, then there are some ways to tag your transcript so that Google has a bit more instruction to work with. And it's all documented within the YouTube help.
And once you've uploaded the transcript file, then you get sort of an interface like we had with the Google generated caption, where it has time start and stop things that you could make some edits to?
Yeah, so it would convert it to captions, but then it would provide you the ability to edit that. Yep. So, any questions about this? Okay. So, let's look at the other aspects of media accessibility. Next one up is audio description. So this is where you have video, and somebody can't see the video, and there's some content that it's just not going to be accessible to them because it's visual in nature. And I always say, because this is kind of a new thing, it's not a new thing, but it's new to a lot of people. And so my advice is always think ahead about the fact that some people are not going to be able to see your video, and plan for that as you're scripting, or however you're producing your video. Try to make sure that audio description is not needed. So if you get on-screen text, narrate that. Try to be sure, just like a lecturer that is speaking to a class that has a blind student in it. They need to verbalize all the stuff they're doing up front. They need to verbalize what they're writing on the board or what they're demonstrating. So the same kind of thing, you're producing a video, and there may be people in the audience who can't see the video, but you want them to have access to all the content. So if you integrate that into the production, you don't have to do audio description usually. But there will be some cases where there is visual content and audio description is necessary. So it does go, I've used the word audio description. Sometimes it's just called description, sometimes video description, described video, descriptive narration. These are all words that mean essentially the same thing. But it's a separate narrative track that accompanies the video to provide access to those visual details, as it says here. So there are a few different kinds of description, and I've listed them here in descending order by quality or cost. The quality and cost, I think they probably are very highly correlated. The first is to hire this out, unless you've got the skills to do it yourself, but to have recorded narration. So a human provides the narration, and then that gets remixed into the video so that the audio description volume is significantly loud compared to the program audio, that you can hear it. So there's a little bit of adjusting. You get these two audio tracks, and you're adjusting the volume of each so that they blend together well, and so audio description doesn't get masked by background audio. And you've got to do the timing just right too. So you fit the description into places where there isn't somebody talking, essentially. You've got room to squeeze the description in. So a lot of times, this is more of an art and a science than captioning is. There's a lot of careful decision making that needs to be made about what to say, because how you describe something could have a big impact on the meaning of the video, but also how much time you need in order to insert the information, and that's kind of a specialized skill to know sort of how to do that. So farming it out is often the best choice. But another strategy is to record audio as a separate audio file. So you could do that. You can do the recording yourself, save it as an MP3, and there's at least one player, the JW player, which is a very popular Flash and HTML5 media player that's out there, used on the web a lot. It supports audio description as an MP3 file. So you just provide the MP3. There's a tag that's included in the documentation where you tell it where the MP3 file resides, and then it automatically does the syncing. It provides a button on the player so users can toggle the description on and off. It has some really interesting sort of experimental features where it does some what's called ducking, where when the audio description track has some actual audio on it, it's watching ahead and it sees that there's audio description coming up, then it automatically lowers the volume of the program audio at that point. And then when the audio description is over, it raises the program audio back up again. So it's a little abrupt. So that's different than a mixing engineer actually doing those adjustments. It just drops the bottom out and then raises the program audio back up again. And so it's kind of startling when that happens. The third way is actually the way that's recommended within the HTML5 specification, and that is not to have audio at all, but to have text. And this is actually very attainable. This is something that we could all do just by using Amara or any of the other captioning tools. And instead of typing in captions, we would be typing in descriptions. And so you're listening, watching the video, and you're seeing, okay, here's some visual content, and there's no audio here that's given any sort of clues as to what this is, so I'm going to have to provide some description. So at that point, using Amara, for example, you type in a description of this moment, and you sync that with the video so that it's going to be injected at that point when there's a little bit of silence, squeezing in. And then you just do the same process. You export to VTT and feed that to an HTML5 media player. HTML5 has the track element that supports description as VTT. And so the idea with text-based description is that that text will be read by the computer. Maybe ultimately that'll be built into browsers, and browsers will read it. But current best practice is for screen readers to read that. So you have an HTML5 player that exposes the description track at the right times, and screen readers read that then at the right times. So, and I'll show you in a little bit a media player that supports that. So this is the low-hanging fruit. That's something that we can all do with the same tools that we're using to do captions. So that's do-it-yourself text-based description. Use a captioning tool, compose the description text, sync it with the video, insert brief descriptions during periods when there is no competing audio content, allow enough time for a screen reader to read the description. That is an inexact science. We don't know how fast a person is going to have their screen reader set. Most screen reader users do operate at blazing speeds. They read very, very, very fast. And so if you sort of think about it as somebody speaking fairly fast, then probably you're going to be able to squeeze text in, at that rate. The screen reader is going to read faster than any human speaks. All of the on-screen text, that needs to be in there. Succinct descriptions of any visual information that is integral to the communication. And then, again, export to VTT for use in an HTML5 video player, such as the Able player.
Can you talk about what would need to be described? Since, like, my video, for example, was just an interview with a student, and at certain points she was doing different things. She was playing volleyball, she was sitting in a room with an interviewer, it really wasn't pertinent to what she was talking about, but she did change scenes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it may or may not be pertinent. The best way to kind of get a sense is to watch a few videos that have audio description and see what the professionals are determining needs to be described. And they're always trade-offs. So it's whatever you have time for and whatever is integral to the message. So, but the fact somebody's playing volleyball, that might be a key piece of information because, it says something about the person and contributes a little bit to the character development. But I don't remember somebody playing volleyball in your video, so maybe it wasn't that key of a detail. And if it's crowded and you're having a hard time like squeezing, the audio description in because people are talking all the time, then that would be the kind of detail that probably would be on the cutting room floor. You really don't need that. But you definitely would need to know who's speaking, what their titles are, That's the key information, I think, from a video like that.
And you mentioned checking out other videos with audio description. Can you give the group some examples of where we would find those?
Yeah, I'll give you one example, and that is our own video collection at uw.edu/doit. /doit, DOIT/video. We have all of our videos here that we produced at Do It from 1994 to present. And it's actually good to view a broad cross-section time-wise, because we've used different vendors over those years, and they all have sort of different philosophies about what needs to be described. So back in the early days, we were using WGBH. It's one of the leaders in the description world. They sort of pioneered the technology. They became a little too expensive and too slow for us, and so we started using other vendors. We've used, I think, 4 different vendors over the years. But I'll just pick this one, IT Accessibility, what campus leaders have to say. And as I'm showing this, I'm also showing this video player, which is Able Player. This is a player that we developed, and it's up there available as an open source player. And it's actually being significantly improved upon this summer with help from the Big Ten Conference. They actually are contributing a full-time programmer to working on this. And as I've been here over the last few days, I've gotten like 50 new updates from him. He just keeps contributing more and more and more and more code to really make this the goal is for the Big Ten, for this to be the player that the Big Ten universities use. And so we're hoping that it'll be viable and everybody will want to use it. But it has really good accessibility. Among other things, you can tab to it, and then I'm just pressing tab now, and I can operate any of the controls with the tab key. It also has keyboard shortcuts, so like P is for play, and so anywhere on the web page I can hit P to play, P to pause, and S to stop, and so forth. It has captions are built in, of course. It also has a D button for descriptions, and it's highly configurable. So we can control the modifier keys. If just hitting P is going to conflict with other things that you have going on in your browser, different plugins or whatever, then you can add support for Alt and Control, so then you have the Alt Control P to make that happen. And then you can control whether captions are on by default, whether description is on by default, whether we're using text-based description. And if so, if we want to see that, we want to actually make it visible or just hide it so screen reader users can access it. We also have support for interactive transcripts, and so we can ask whether to highlight the transcript or to make the transcript keyboard enabled so a person can move the keyboard through the transcript and press enter to start the player at that point, this kind of thing. So I just turned description on, whereas it was previously off.
So if you don't have this player, are there other players that allow you to turn description on and off? Or would you have to
no.
create 2 versions of the
Well,
video?
so I mentioned JW Player. It supports description as an MP3 file. This supports description, 2 different kinds of description. One is VTT text-based description, like the HTML5 spec calls for, and it's the only player that supports that. So this is why we built it, because nobody else was doing this. And the other thing that it supports is what we've been doing all the time, all over the years with Do It, is we provide a described version that's professionally, the description is professionally mixed in, and a non-described version. And so what happens then is it toggles, if you push the D button, it toggles between the two versions.
So
So-
are those two separate video links for the description and the, like YouTube audio described is separate link?
Yeah, so,
it's separate file.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's what we did on YouTube is we uploaded both versions, the main version, or the non-described version and the described version are both available on YouTube. And on YouTube, we have a link in the comments that says also available with audio description, and that links to the other YouTube version. So a person can easily get back and forth between the two. So, but if you want to watch it here on our video player, then we now have description enabled, and I'm going to refresh just to make sure that kicks in. So now our D button is available. It's not grayed out anymore. So we should be watching the described version, and you'll hear then this supplemental narration happening.
We are committed to the notion that everyone should have an opportunity to participate in higher education, whether it be learning perspective, research perspective, or an opportunity to work here at this institution. We benefit from that because we get to enjoy the talents and the skills of those people who come in, and also their perspective, which in many cases will be different from the perspective of others on campus. So accessibility becomes a very important value of the university.
Michael K. Young, President, University of Washington. Images of the teacher and students in classrooms and at computer stations. Text adjust through a CCTV. Words appear. IT accessibility, what campus leaders have to say. Tracy Matrano, Director of IT Policy, Cornell University.
We're a leading university globally. We want the best talent in the world for our...
So you see how that kind of, they interjected that in just at the right moment. Could have started at the beginning and say, Michael K. Young, President, University of Washington, because he started speaking right at the very beginning of the video. There really wasn't time to interject anything. So they had to wait until he was done. Then there was a brief pause during that kind of introduction. So that's when they introduced the person that just spoke, described very briefly what was happening with the graphics on the screen, and then introduced Tracy Matrano, who now speaks. And so that's kind of the way it works throughout the video, is they just find that optimum point and interject some information that otherwise is only going to be available to visual people. So the VTT version is the same text, but as a VTT file, very similar to the caption file, and if a user has their settings here in this player to access the text-based version, then instead of using this alternative video, they would just hear, the screen reader would just read the description at the right time, so at the same time that it's spoken here. Questions about that? So here on the slides, I have a couple of additional links. One, the links to caption service providers, another, the links to description service providers. And so you can find out who provides those services and talk to them about what their costs would be. Which brings us to choosing an accessible media player. Obviously, the one that we've built is very accessible. It's open source. It's up there on GitHub. And we have attempted to answer all these and many more questions. But these are the kind of questions that you need to ask as you're thinking, okay, how am I going to deliver my video in a way that's accessible? So it's one thing that you've got captions and you've got description, but you need a player that supports the things that you've created. So captions in particular, So we just sort of focus on that. You produce captions, obviously you need a media player that supports them. Up until recently, we could say YouTube's great. YouTube does wonderful things with captions. Vimeo is not. Vimeo has done nothing with captions until just a couple months ago. They finally started supporting captions. So they don't do all the things that YouTube does with captions, but they at least support them now. So at least it now is possible in Vimeo to have captions, upload captions, and have those accompany your video. But there are still other media players out there that don't support captions, so you need to ask that question for sure. If you or if your campus is going to be providing a media player, it has to support captions. Other questions are, can you operate it with a keyboard? That's a simple thing to test. If I just tabbed to the player, can I get to the player at all? Some players just don't provide any focusable elements. There's nothing that you can tab to. But if you can't give the player focus, can you control it? Can you press play? Can you press pause? Can you fast forward? Can you mute? Do all the things that you would be able to do with a mouse. Is it possible to do those same things if you can't use a mouse? Are the controls properly labeled for screen reader users? This is where YouTube right now is good, and because of they practice this development cycle where you never know what it's going to be from one day to the next, and you wake up one day and they've rolled out a new version while you're sleeping, and sometimes they break accessibility, and this is often where that happens, where you've got buttons that are labeled clearly for screen reader users. So screen reader gets to the YouTube player and says play button, and other obvious controls are there, and then sometimes you go to the YouTube player and it says graphic 210 and other things that just don't make any sense at all. And so that's an important thing to try out. Have somebody that has a screen reader just try out the player that you're looking at to see whether the buttons have labels and are clearly communicated what the function of those labels are. Does it support however you're wanting to deliver audio description? So if you're going to be using the text-based description, again, Able Player is the only player that supports that currently, but maybe others, since it is part of the HTML5 spec, then maybe others will be supporting that in the near future. Does it include some sort of API, an application program interface? So if you or somebody else, that's supporting your campus, has the ability and the desire to extend its functionality, for example, by building interactive transcripts and searchability and all those things that really make captions cool, can you do that? And so we were able to build our player because the HTML5 does have lots of hooks. It's got a really powerful API that allows us to build our own player that taps into its capabilities. JW Player, the other player that I mentioned several times now, also has a very good API that allows you to develop your own interface for accessing what's going on under the hood within that player. Just in terms of the browser's default capabilities, if you just use HTML5 video tags, like just those tags that I showed you earlier, you can get good video with captions. Internet Explorer 10 and higher has full keyboard support. You can access all the controls on the keyboard. All the buttons are very clearly labeled for screen readers. Other browsers aren't quite as good, and some really aren't good at all. Chrome and Safari, you can't operate with keyboard very well. You can hit space to start, space to pause, but you can't access any other sort of features. You can't scrub ahead, scrub back. Firefox has been really slow to support captions. They were the last of the major browsers to support captions, but they finally do now, just as of a couple versions ago. So all the browsers now support captions. No browsers natively support audio description. So if you want audio description support, you have to build that in, or provide separate versions. So you've got, a described version, a non-described version. Users can decide which version to show. You can get to AblePlayer at terrillthompson.com/AblePlayer, and that site has a bunch of demos showing its capabilities, as well as a link to GitHub, which is where we're hosting the open source repository. So any questions about choosing an accessible media player? Or about anything else we've talked about? Okay, so finally I just had a couple slides and just kind of wanted to open it up for any sort of discussion. Do
I
you have a
do
question?
have one question about the player and the way that you include it in your web page. Are you just using that HTML5 video tag, or are you doing something?
Yeah, that's the way it's working now. Maybe not on the Do It Video site, but in the latest version of AblePlayer, you just use just standard HTML5 video and all the attributes that you can use with that, and then include the AblePlayer JavaScript. You link to that within your HTML, and then that JavaScript automatically looks for a video tag, and then builds the player around that video tag. Yeah?
Do you know if all browsers are currently supporting HTML5 automatically playing video?
Automatically playing video?
Like you have to add that extra coding. Because I know when you copy a URL from YouTube, it doesn't have, you have to change the code. If you're embedding a video.
To play automatically.
To play automatically. Do you have to, are there any, I know that Chrome and Firefox will do it automatically. I don't know about other browsers.
Yeah, I think all the major browsers do.
You wouldn't have to change the code anymore.
No, I'm not sure about changing the code, so changing the YouTube URL
yeah,
to
embed code, like if we're embedding it into a content or like CMS or LMS, to default to play in HTML5.
Oh, okay.
I know that's an issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure about defaulting to HTML5 because users have had to opt in for that, and so some users might not have opted in, and so I'm not sure kind of where that stands. But in terms of automatically playing, so if you're wanting like a video to start up automatically when
Well, no, it's just like for embedding into a website or a web page instead of, I know sometimes you can post a link and it will automatically embed it, but if you want to embed a video and have it default to an HTML5 player so that it's more accessible,
yeah.
Are all browsers supporting that, or?
I think they probably should, yeah. I haven't tested it, so.
Okay.
But all browsers do support HTML5 video. So
Okay.
as long as what YouTube is providing is good, valid HTML5 video code, which I think it is,
Okay.
and their embed code is an iframe that links to whatever they're doing on their server. And I think probably it's valid HTML5 video, in which case what you would get on any browser would be HTML5 video and is supported.
Okay.
So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so just in terms of strategy, I just had some thoughts, because this is something we actually are trying to figure out ourselves now. We don't have it mastered yet. Obviously, a video that's gotten over 7,000 hits on our YouTube channel, not captioned. So we still have a ways to go to kind of make sure that our goal is certainly everything that's outward facing should be captioned. We would like, because of the tremendous benefits that come with captioning academic materials, that we get more lecture capture captioning happening, particularly in large courses and with video that's recycled from semester to semester. You know, we want to take advantage of that, even if we don't have a student who has stepped forward as needing a reasonable accommodation. We want to caption that. So that's our goal in trying to increase the amount of video that's captioned is to make it affordable and to make it easy. So otherwise, I don't think it's going to happen. So the affordability comes partly by negotiating a great price with preferred vendors, and all the captioning vendors will come down in price the more you do. And so if we can get everybody who's doing video, we've got actually a lot of people doing video across campus, and a lot of them have captioning. And we've been just keep finding more and more people who have been off on their own, hiring people to caption their videos. And so, you know, we say, hey, why don't you come with us? Because we've been talking about this for years and trying to get everybody on the same page. And we do finally now have a contract with a vendor, so everybody at the university can caption through this same vendor. And at the moment, we don't have enough bulk to get the price significantly down, but we're hoping by having this in place and by making it easy, then more people will be captioning. We're evangelizing a lot, trying to get people to do this, and the more people do it, the cheaper it's going to become. So we also are trying to put some centralized funding into this, and that's always tough to figure out, okay, who's going to pay for this. But we actually are fortunate to have a director of academic technology right now who is really on board with this, particularly the universal design benefits, the searchability, the interactive transcripts, all that. Plus he's always been a believer. He himself is a faculty member and has always been a believer that accessibility mattered. And he captioned all of his videos as a faculty member by choice. And so he thinks everybody else should too. And now that he's director of academic technologies, he thinks if we're paying to provide services like lecture capture for the campus community, then captioning should be built into that. And he was very much on board with captioning everything. All the lecture capture stuff, we should just be captioning that. It should be part of the service that we provide, until he found out how much that was going to cost. And it was going to be more than the lecture capture service itself. So captioning everything might be more than is feasible, but we can still have some sort of means of prioritizing. You know, so again, those really large courses, you got a lot of people that could potentially benefit. And you know, there are other ways that we can sort of look at the problem and say, okay, you know, we've got kind of this high priority set of courses that we could caption, and we could put some centralized funding towards that, just to make it easy, so people will do it. And then also, in terms of making it easy, you're having just a real simple web portal. That's the nice thing about having a preferred vendor too, is you can set it up, so it's real easy for a person just to go, anybody on campus can go to the same website, can upload their video there, can retrieve their caption file from there. They can log in using their standard university login, and it's just a real simple sort of thing to use. We haven't got that set up yet. That's kind of our dream. A good example, though, is Stanford. Stanford has such a portal like that, and that you can see that at captioning. I think it's captioning.stanford.edu or captions.stanford.edu. Let me just look real quick. Not captions. Captioning. So they've got some help stuff, and then information about the captioning system, and then you'd have to have a login to actually get into the portal and upload media. But it's very simple to use. And actually, the system that they set up, they have multiple vendors that are kind of competing within the space. And so you can choose. You go in. One of the things you do, you upload the media, and then check which vendor you want to use for your captioning, and it lists the prices. And so the idea is, hopefully, they'll all sort of compete with each other to to have the best pricing to get the most traffic through this system. So we're kind of looking at this as a model and hoping that maybe we can set up something similar to that, just to make captioning kind of, in some ways centralized and easy for people to do. Also, I mentioned crowdsourcing and the possibility that that might have. We tossed around ideas about that too, particularly tapping into alumni and students, maybe offering some academic credit. It actually, we believe, is academically beneficial. It's beneficial to learning to caption video in your course or in your area of study. That if you're listening to the what's being said so closely that you're able to type everything, then that's just going to reinforce all those concepts, and you're going to pick up details that you didn't pick up otherwise. And I just think it's a great learning tool. And so getting students to do that work really could be a beneficial thing, and would get that much more material captioned. We could develop an in-house service that maybe in part would tap into the crowd and would manage the crowd, but otherwise we would have some people who would be able to crank out, urgent needs. And a lot of institutions are doing that sort of thing. We haven't taken that step yet. And then again, if you just have small captioning needs, just a video here and there, and your videos aren't super long, then doing it yourself, as you've seen today, really is a viable option. Just wanted to mention this example on the note on crowdsourcing. TED, the TED Talks, they have the Open Translation Project, and virtually every one of their videos goes up onto Amara. They use Amara for this, and people pounce on them and just start to caption them. They subtitle them into every imaginable language. And they've got, as of today, I just created this slide, 61,205 translations of their videos in 105 languages, and 17,372 volunteer translators have done that work. So that's a real success story in terms of really tapping into that crowd. They've got a lot of, obviously they've got a supporting community and people that are really into TED Talks, and so they're willing to put that time in. But I like to think a lot of those, particularly larger universities, also have loyal alums and people that are dedicated to what's going on at the university, and could maybe not attain those kind of numbers, but could attain good numbers and build real solid communities of people who are helping to caption media. So if you succeed in building a system, having some sort of method in place to caption video and to do these other things related to accessibility, then the next step is getting people to use it. And so that's kind of where we are now, doing a lot of evangelizing, talking about the benefits. We spend a lot of time reaching out to people as we see videos that aren't captioned and complimenting them on their wonderful video and saying, hey, you should caption that, and here's how you do it. We've got this webpage we've created that talks people through the process, and we're hoping to improve that webpage even better and sort of get more and more people who are aware of it and are utilizing the services that are out there. So persuading the institution to embrace and implement the benefits, really has helped us over the last few years to change the conversation by talking about all the different benefits that come with captioning in particular. And we're trying to create a culture where anyone who isn't captioning their video, it's like not having a cell phone. That, what? You create a video and you didn't caption it? It's just so weird. Why would you do that? And finally, maybe an institutional policy that says all video must be accessible. We're kind of a non-policy sort of institution for the most part. We work from the ground up, a lot of grassroots type stuff, and we're sort of afraid of institutional policy. But the laws are what the laws are, and we've been talking over the last couple of days about the W3C standards, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and Section 508 standards. All the standards that are out there include captioning as a level A, priority 1 issue. And audio description is a level 2A WCAG 2 success criteria. So no matter what the standard is, captioning is there, and audio description is close behind as things that are required by law. And so, so that's the institutional policy certainly could reinforce that, I think. So that's all I have. If you guys have ideas or thoughts or any further questions, speak up. Yeah.
I had a question about, from the open forum the other day, when you were talking about the different levels of standards, that the third level of standard was sign language on videos. How is that, I'm not sure I understand that, how that's beneficial in addition to the captions.
Well, some people, so captions are, they benefit people who read English. So that if somebody can't hear, they can read the English and they can follow along that way. But not all deaf people speak English or read English. So that's where that comes in that sign language is their first language. English is, for many, a second language here in the United States. But for some, it's not a second language. English is not a second language. So sign language is maybe the only language that they know. So in order to meet the needs of that group, having a sign language interpreter, would be beneficial. So that opens up a whole other can of worms, though, because there are different sorts of sign language. So do you provide, an interpreter in every, language? And you also have international issues to think about. That somebody in the UK speaks a different sign language, and people all over the world. There are lots of different languages that are sign languages, and so we need to provide all of them. Ideally, it'd be great. Internationalization, I think, is in some ways an accessibility issue. But subtitling and making your video available in Spanish is going to reach a lot of people that don't have access otherwise too. So, so that's kind of the idea there, that English captions don't reach everybody that could benefit. Does that make sense? Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah. So, one of the things that happens a lot now that we're using tools like Google Apps, and I can kind of see it happening with Amara, is that individual people at the university become owners of a certain set of things, documents, captioned videos, whatever. And when those people leave the university, that content isn't necessarily transferred to a different owner. And so it seems that it might be useful to have some kind of institutional account for something like Amara. Do you operate with that kind of strategy at UW, or do you?
Not with Amara. We're really just sort of using Amara here and there, and that's not. We don't have any sort of preferred relationship with them. So that's just a recommendation for somebody who has their own little small need to do it yourself, the do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah.
So Amara does provide enterprise accounts. So then you get beyond what's free, and they have services that they provide for a fee. And an enterprise account might be a way of doing that, of managing your university's media assets.
Well, in part I was thinking of it because you had mentioned that if somebody can't get what they need out of the YouTube version of it, they might get pointed to the Amara version. But that's not quite as indefinitely available.
Yeah,
as,
true.
Yeah, you might think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Well, ultimately, in unless it's a situation where, because the only time someone would be using Amara to create a subtitle file and not upload it to YouTube, but rather show it through Amara, that would be if they couldn't upload it to YouTube, which would mean that they don't own that video, which would mean that there's kind of a permissions copyright issue anyway, unless we're talking about a student with a disability. So in that case, ultimately, the caption file would need to end up with the owner of the video, and then it wouldn't be an issue of an individual owning it, because it would be on the PSU website or the whatever website, whatever YouTube account the owner or publisher held.
All right, well, we're right about 4:30, so appreciate everybody coming out.
And I just want to thank Terrill for 2 days of really great presentations and workshops. So thank you so much.